All right, here's the first question. You ready?
Somebody just said, for Moody Radio, you ought to give them is it chapstick you need to give them for the, and I go, that wasn't the part I was talking about. It would be more like preparation H. Right. That's what I was talking about.
All right, here's the first question. How do you discipline and set expectations when you only have the kids part-time and the co-parent doesn't enforce rules and undermines your disciplinary actions?
Yeah, I have no idea. Okay, so what's the next question?
Yeah, right.
That's probably one of the toughest roles, and when you have, it's almost good guy, bad guy kind of thing, or sugar daddy, and so you're trying to enforce rules. Somebody else is wanting it to be just free for all, do whatever, and you're pretty permissive. And I tell parents, usually it's the mom that's asked the question, because dad's usually the culprit that is being the one that's not holding to rules and stuff like that. Excuse me. Wait a minute. Mom, hold to the structure. Kids want structure. Even if you lose the relationship temporarily, in the long run, they will come back and want structure. If that structure is designed to help them get to a place where they want to go and keep them from where they don't want to end up. It's not just, some people go, we got to have rules just because we got to have rules. A lady came and said, my daughter is on her phone constantly. And we feel like we need to have a rule that you put the phone up. And okay, does she get out of bed? Yeah, on her own. Does she eat breakfast? And yeah. Go to school? Yeah. Is she doing well in school? Yeah, she's doing great. You have friends? Yeah. Participate in church and stuff? Yeah. Goes to a Young Life Campaigners Bible study. Well, cool. She come home to you guys and yeah. She has a job that she works a little bit, and so when she gets home and eats dinner with us, she's there. She eats dinner with you? Yeah. Do y'all talk a lot? Yeah, it's great. Does she do all her homework and stuff? Yeah. What's the problem? I go, leave it alone. And the idea sometimes is, we got to have rules because you're supposed to have rules. Well, rules set the boundaries and restrictions, and if you're not having a problem with it, then don't have the rules. And the tendency is, I need to be strict. And here's the other thing I would say, because as I said, it's probably a mom asking this question. It's more important for you to be a mom than it is for you to be a dad. And sometimes the mom tries to make up and want to be the strong one, especially with their sons, to make sure that you're pushing your son in the right way. Your son is going to be okay. So go try to be a dad, be a mom. Be what a mom is supposed to be to your son, because he needs a mom a lot more than he needs a distant dad. Are you following me? I would say the same thing about homeschooling. If anybody here homeschools, your kids need a mom a lot more than they need a teacher. So be the mom first. That is so important. Mom instills value, dad validates it. And so what happens is, you want the relationship. There's a special relationship between a mom and a son. That's where Scripture says that a man shall leave his mother, and a woman leave her home, which is her dad, and they travel on to two where they shall become as one. So there's a special relationship between a mom and a son. I will never have the kind of relationship with my son that my wife has with him, and vice versa. Because it's two different things. And most people think, we got to be on the same page. You don't have to be on the same page. It's best if you're in the same chapter, that you're going for the same thing, then you may be doing it, especially if you're split and you're not in the same household. You can't control what's in that other house. That's where wisdom comes in. Lord, help me to understand what I'm dealing with here, what I can change and what I can't change. And there's some things you can't change. So that's where it's doing what you think is right. And you do that. But you may be doing things that are pushing your child away. And if it is, then quit doing those things. Let your child choose to walk away. Don't let you be the one that's causing them to walk away. Does that help? Does that answer it? When did you start really poofing your hair like that? That'd be my question. Because it used to be shorter or something. I mean, did you do that?
It's too long right now.
What
I got to
is
get a
it?
haircut.
I mean, do you do that to kind of distract people from?
Is this the 2% conversation right now?
Yeah. Do you do it because you're trying to distract people from the gray hair that's in your beard?
No, you like that?
Yeah.
Getting worse and worse.
Whatever.
All right, here we go. How should we react to the speaker when they're making fun of the other guys talking?
Support the speaker always.
How should we react to our kids when they're disrespectful to us?
Yeah, with vengeance. No. You know what? You have to ask the question first, why are they being disrespectful? Are you doing something that's causing them to be disrespectful? If you're not listening to them, if you don't give them a chance to answer, if you're interrupting them all the time, if you're talking and you're not given a chance to have conversation, if you're controlling them, I mean, all the things that I've kind of said here that you need to transfer on this side, these are the things Scripture talks about. Don't provoke your child. This will provoke them to wrath. Why? Because what's wrath? It's anger. It's not getting what they want. And what they want is to take control of their life. They really want to be responsible and they really want structure. So it's saying, give it to them. But if you don't do those things and you keep treating them like this down here, you're not going to see your kid when they go off to school or enter the military or get a job. They'll give it up. And so the disrespect is you have to ask yourself the question, am I doing something that's causing that disrespect? Am I not spending time? That's what I tell everybody. You've got to spend time with your child. Somewhere you mark off some time. Every Tuesday night, we're going to go eat a great meal and whatever. And somebody goes, well, I can't afford to do that. You can't afford not to do that. You know, you're saving money or putting it back or have retirement. You're going to give it all to your kids anyway. You know, go ahead and give it to them now in the form of a relationship. I mean, go make some memories while you still have yours, you know, kind of thing, until you get consumed. There's a part of it where you just say, I want to make sure that I'm creating the opportunity for respect to happen. Now, disrespect means that they are actively pursuing something against you. You may have wronged them and you don't even know it. I've gone to people and gone, what? Man, the way you're treating me, what have I done wrong? Tell me. I'm all ears. You know, and so it's for a reason in some way. Now, that's what I've always found. It's usually for a reason. Now, if it's a kid that's gone, well, you won't let me smoke pot. Well, you're not giving me enough money. Well, now you're dealing with entitlement. Now you're dealing with the selfishness of a kid, which means they're being influenced by everybody else that's getting everything because they think everybody has everything and they don't. Your kids ever think that? Yeah. I mean, and so that's just the culture that they live in. And so there's a reason for the disrespect, and that's why I would put when you formulate rules within your home, that the number one thing you need to put down, if you're disrespectful, this is what's going to happen. And then you make sure that it's painful enough that they go, I don't want to, that they learn. And they go, I don't want to be disrespectful. Follow me? The whole point of having some kind of consequence for something, if they do something wrong right here, and it takes them 2 weeks to change and to repent and say, hey, what I said a couple of weeks ago isn't good. The hope is this, that they get to a point where they are now coming after a week rather than 2 weeks. And then the idea that they're coming the next day. Hey, Mom, I said something last night. Dad, I made a comment I shouldn't have made. The idea that they do it exactly. Hey, Dad, you're such a... I don't want to say that. No, let me back up. I don't mean to say that. Then it's getting them to think beforehand. Okay, the distance between here and here is this much. The distance between here and here is this much. So progress has been made that they're moving to a point that they're realizing I'm doing something wrong. And disrespect isn't going to change just like that. There's motive. All behavior is goal-oriented. There's motive behind their behavior. They may be pissed that they are stuck and they don't have a dad at home or they don't have a mom at home and they're taking it out on everybody else. That's where this circle over here dealing with the issues becomes key. If you've done everything, I feel disrespected. Am I doing something that would cause you to disrespect me? Text them. If you feel that, text them this afternoon. You can change starting tonight.
You said to follow up with a consequence. What kind of consequence would that be?
What's that? Whatever's going to get their attention. I mean, if respect's the number one thing, that's a great question. If respect is the number one thing, then what's the number one thing you can take away from them that would get their attention? A girlfriend, shoot her. No, you can't. Don't limit the girlfriend. No, you do that, you're just gonna, the sweetest fruit is sometimes the forbidden fruit sometimes becomes the sweetest fruit, and you may cause a movement toward that. But how do you get their attention? If you pay for their cell phone, if it's, whatever. I give kids stuff so I can take it away and get the, and I go, because if you got a kid that loves video games, you know what I would do? I would go buy that 140-inch flat panel. I'd convert your garage into the best place to play video games, and you get to do it and have everything up to date. Go ahead and spend some of that money you're saving. You're trying, either that or you can just send it to us. Send your kid and send your money to us. Spend it now. Spend it now. Have that. And then when sports comes on, man, you guys are in a great shape to watch some good sports. But it just means that I'm going to do this so you can take it away. You don't get to play. If you're disrespectful to your mom, you don't get to do that. Yeah, but what? No, you need to figure that out. I'm asking you to be respectful, and if you can't be, then this is what you're going to lose. That's your choice, not mine. I provided to have this. I don't know what the biggest screen is now that you can get. It's like, it's huge. The wall. Yeah. I do a surround wall. Does that help?
Yeah, and you said they should come to you in 2 weeks, but it should get shorter. So you need to make sure they come to you eventually. Talk to you about
Well, I don't think it's making sure. I think it's providing the atmosphere. The only thing you could do is become more approachable. And I'm not saying this that you're not approachable. You've been very kind, even though you were late. And no. No, you're very approachable. And I go, so usually a child that feels like you might be unapproachable, they may feel like, it could be damaged somewhere. Are you divorced? Yeah, a divorce, I think people kind of underestimate the effects of divorce. It affects kids for a long time, because they feel rejected. They feel like somebody wouldn't stay around. So they looked after themselves rather than looking after. That's why I tell people all the time, get divorced after the kids graduate from high school. Wait it out. Suck it up, kind of thing. And that's where it puts you, and so some of the anger that he has toward that situation, it's getting aimed at you. And you know why it gets aimed at you? Is because a son knows that a mother will always love them regardless. And so he can spew it at you, and you'll continue to love him. He spews it at dad, and you know what dad will do? Cut him off in a heartbeat, because that's how men are. Men will walk the other way. And we do that in conflict. I'm done. I'll never see them again. And we walk away. Women have that propensity to want to move toward and carry on the relationship. Men, golly, we don't want to put up with that crap, kind of thing. And they'll do that to their own kids. It's pride. That's what it is. So how do you... Or they'll grow their hair out and stick up on top and have a gray beard.
Hey, so how do you tell your teen...
Wait. Here's a second. You're asking me questions.
Yeah.
Do you roll up your pants?
Yeah, I do.
Okay. Here's my 2% coming out. Okay.
All right. I love this. This is so good. So how do you tell your teen that this person is a bad influence? if there's someone that's in their life that you as a parent are seeing that they're a bad influence in their life, how do you as a parent go about talking through that?
Yeah. The first thing I would do, hey, what do you think about so-and-so? Ask them the question. Did you take a picture of that?
You
I
can't
know
handle it,
did.
can you?
That's going to be somewhere. No, I can't. I mean, I immediately wanted to wear a plaid shirt and drive a Subaru, or something. I can't. I think I would bring it. There's two sides of this thing. I'd bring it up to them and go, yeah, tell me about this guy. Is he a good guy? Is he a bad guy? Is he a good girl, bad girl? Tell me a little bit about him. Okay. I get this feeling a little bit. You share it that way rather than being judgmental at the beginning of it. But here's the second part. If they're going to hang out, they're attracted to them for a reason. There is something, maybe that person listens to them. Maybe that person makes them feel valued. Maybe that bad person has no expectations on them. And so they can hang out and be with people. Maybe they just want to belong because they don't feel like they belong anywhere. They feel like they don't have a place. I think those things become important. And if that's the truth, then my comment would be invite them over to have dinner at your house. Why don't you come over and eat? We get this idea. We go all over the world helping. I'm in Ethiopia, I'm in Moscow, I'm in Ukraine, I'm helping all these other people everywhere else. And I was taken back about 6 years ago when here we have this place of hope at Heartlight. It's on 150 acres in this beautiful, beautiful place. Come to us. We'll help you. It's a haven of hope and a place of peace and blah, 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 blah. And a little girl that lived 200 yards away from Heartlight was distraught one afternoon. 15-year-old girl grabbed both of her dogs underneath her arms and walked out and stood on the railroad tracks and just got plastered by the train. They couldn't even identify her. And I've always thought, we go everywhere else, and I wrestle with this. When maybe in God's sovereignty, what God is doing is putting that young person in your child's life so that you can help change them. Wow. That could be your mission project. Instead of thinking they're such bad kids, because I live with all those bad kids. Every kid that lives with us, somebody has said something, I don't want my child hanging out with them. And I can tell you they're the greatest kids I've ever been around. And so what that means is God may be calling you that could be your mission field. Maybe your mission field is next door. Maybe it's a couple. A lady came out. I was hanging new numbers on our mailbox and had gone out to put it on the mailbox. And we have a little bit of a drive. And she came out and she says, "Are you Mark?" They've been our neighbors for 30 years. Yes. But I couldn't tell you her name. But I knew her husband. And she goes, "Well, we lost, Phil last February." And I said, "Well, I noticed he had down here mowing his yard." And I sat there and I thought, how am I so busy that I missed out on a guy that had done work for us and I'd known, I always talked to, and I even went over when I'm mowing our grass, I'll drive over on his yard and help. We kind of live out in the country and it's just a lot of land, and I'll help him do stuff. And it was like 8 months later that I found out that he was dead and gone. And so she said, "Well, do you guys eat tomatoes?" Which I thought was kind of weird. "Are you, Mark? Do you eat tomatoes?" And I said, "Well, sure." And so that afternoon we had over 100 tomatoes. And evidently, Phil had planted all these tomato plants, and she just wanted to connect. And so Jane and I have adopted her, and she's an elderly woman and older than us, but not much. And I just said, we're going to do things for her. So we helped her with an estate sale and all that other stuff. They live across the street from us. I got another piece of mail in my mailbox that was to a guy named Stephen Gregston. And I go, wow, they got it wrong. The guy that lives across the street from me, his name's Stephen Gregston, same last name. His dad and my dad were cousins, and they lived there 12 years, and I didn't even know it. And I'm just going, am I missing out on the people that God has placed in our life or in our proximity, and we don't even think about them? I do now, but it's taken the death of one of them to think about that. And I go, but I always thought that about kids. I've always made comments about kids, that perhaps the bad kids involved in the lives of your kids has been placed there for a reason, but I never thought that maybe God placed Mark and Jan in the middle of a neighborhood that's spread out to influence those people that live around us. And if you live in the country, most people live in the country to get away from everything. And I know that. And you kind of do, don't you? You know, just to get away from stuff. But I'm not so sure that he wants us to get away from people. But I've gone to Ethiopia to help people, you know, and, you know, so I think there's something about taking that on as a project. And I think those kids would respond to you guys just as much as they would respond to me. They need that listening, and they're a bad kid for a reason. Maybe it's because you've done such a great job about teaching compassion within your family that your child is being compassionate for somebody else. Maybe they are, at the core of it, they're really wanting to help somebody else that's the underdog. Oh, I don't want them to spend time with them. That's the very thing that you want them to do. That's what you've been training them to do. What do you think this relationship with Christ is about? You know, that when you love what? The least of these, perhaps that kid that's a mess is the least of them. Anyway, that's my thoughts.
Okay, here's a question, kind of two sides of the same question. So what's the best way to fuel my daughter's desire to be herself and not conform to the most social norms without overstepping or pushing her away from it? And the other one I want to tie to that is how do you encourage your teen to do social activities and build relationships outside the home? So one of them is how, you know, the idea of like, how do you help them to not conform to the social norms? And then also, how do you help your kid be out in society and actually, you know?
Yeah. Well, being out in society is the thing that's going to help prepare them for the world that they're going to live in eventually. Usually the problem is they start being involved in stuff and we don't realize that we need to build a relationship. It's almost like we're waiting until they get in trouble before we start building the communication lines where we can talk to one another. And we got it backwards. What you need to be doing is spending time building the relationship so that when they are more social and out encouraging things, that you've built that time up and the habits up of spending time with them, that they can ask you questions and you can have an influence. Because once they've gone over the edge, you know, if you will, it's hard to come back and get to them, because now you got to spend all your time constructing while you see your child go downhill. And so I think I want them to be social. I'm one of those guys that I want kids to date. You know, the bunkus about, you know, well, I kissed dating goodbye. Remember that book? Is that guy a member of your church?
No, that guy doesn't go to church anymore, man.
I know, what an idiot. You know, I'm going, and who was even stupider were the people that bought the book of a 21-year-old that's telling you not to. I mean, that book caused more divorces, and it was a mess. And I go, the dating process is a courtship. I mean, it's a matter of finding out about somebody. We have guys and girls in a program. Most places like ours don't. They have either all guys or all girls. Because I want our kids to know, I want our girls to know that they're not just sex objects. I want our guys to treat our ladies that live with us like they're not sex objects. I want them to learn how to relate to one another without thinking that it's got to be sexual all the time. And so that means they've got to go out and do things. And it means when they go out and do things, when they get home, somebody's going to be up asking them questions. Hey, what about this? What'd y'all do? Where'd you go? Not as an interrogation thing, but as a source of interest that I care about you. I'm just asking the question. And I think we get fearful. Well, My daughter goes out, surely she's going to get screwed by this guy because he's just as horny as the next. Well, you got part of it right. He is the horny as the next, but it doesn't mean that she's going to get it, because the values that you poured into her have helped. And you keep that relationship going. Kids will change and hold to things because of the relationship. I have kids telling me, I don't want to do that, but I will do it because, Mark, you're asking me. That's all I'm asking. That's all I'm asking. I asked a young lady who heard me on the radio in Morton, Illinois. And so we had this little thing before we went out seating, and we invited people to come over, and this lady wanted me to meet her daughter. Daughter comes over. She's dating a guy that plays drums. He's a pastor's son, plays drums in some little choral thing, but has been dating him for a while. And mom's afraid that they're getting sexual and stuff. And so I'm sitting there looking at her and go, hey, tell me about your relationship with, the moron or whatever his name is. Cassidy, I don't know what his name is. And she says, oh, it's a good relationship. He's a pastor's son. She goes, can you sign this thing? Because he listens to you on the radio. And I go, well, then he must really be messed up, unless he's using it as some sleeping pill or something. I go, he listens to me, a parenting program. He listens to me. Yeah, he just loves listening to the kids and all that stuff. And I look at the mom, I go, you've got a good guy that wants good things. He's a pastor's son. He's doing a great thing. He's a wonderful kid. Well, I'm afraid this. Okay, then just ask your daughter. Well, I can't talk to her about that. So her name was Celia. And I said, Celia, okay, look at me in the eyes. And she did. I go, promise me that you're not going to have sex with this guy. Just promise me that. She goes, I promise you. Pinky swear. And I put out, and so mom sent me a picture, I'll show you, of me pinking swear with her daughter. It just takes somebody saying, will you not do that? Now, the world's not going to come to an end if they do. There's other things that are worse in the world than that. But at least it's connecting, saying, this is important. This is important. We didn't talk about anything else. And so sometimes we don't want them to be social because we're fearful that they're going to fall into things. You keep the relationship and you have the discussions, then you don't have to be quite as fearful of those things. You follow me? That's why they're asking you questions. Now, if your parenting style is because you messed up, then you're being selfish. Well, I'm not going to let them go out because they're going to have doing what I did. That's where y'all need to have some of that discussion. Sweetheart, this is why I'm worried. Now, I'd drive Jan home. I had a 68 Dodge Charger, and I would drive Jan home. And the minute that we pulled in the driveway, Jan's mom would be in front, flicking the light on and off, on the outside. Get in here in Morse code. Get in here right now, and I'm glad she did, because Jan just couldn't stay off of me. And joking.
Okay, so this is a practical question. Do you have any suggestions for handling conflict between children in the teaching phase and children that are in the training and development phase of growth? So like a kid on this side and a kid on this side having conflict in the home. How do you handle that?
Yeah, if it's two kids on this side, I think the timeout thing or taking something away from them is good. I think if it's this one doing something to this one, then it is saying to this one, I'm going to treat you differently than I treat this. You're going to have more privileges and more opportunities. But if you can't treat him a certain way, your sibling or older brother, and set the example, then I am not doing these things for you. You hold a role in this family, and I want you to uphold that role. That's all I'm asking. And I would take him out and go, how are you doing with your little brother or little sister? Well, they drive me nuts. I know. I would do that with if a dad and a son go out, mom's driving me nuts. I know. You're not undermining a mom. You're appealing to the son. I know. We all have faults. And I'm sure that I bother other people the way that she may be bothering you. But let's talk about it. But you don't have the opportunity to take it out on her. Yeah, but Dad, she just, God, I know. But you got to stop. compassion, but you're putting up a boundary. It's not a rule, it's just a boundary. You're not going to, and the boundary's this: she's your mother, but she's my wife, and you're not going to treat my wife that way. Follow me? This is where the strength comes out a little bit. I remember putting my finger in my daughter's chest when she was like in the 8th grade, and I just kind of pushed, and I had my finger right on her chest, and I was going, "That is my wife, and you will never talk to her again like that." Do you understand what I'm saying? It's intimidating, isn't it? And she needs to be intimidated. There's a part of it, you're not going to do this. She never has since then. And I'm saying that's where there's strength that comes out. I don't show that strength. I can let it rip if I need to. Because I said I don't tolerate much. But I'm very protective. You know, of the girls that we have, I'm protective of just, I can let it rip. But for my wife, I'm going to protect her. I'm called to do that. I will always do that. So.
How do you best avoid trying to answer an emotional question by using logic?
I remember somebody asking that question last night, and it's good, because the tendency is we think, well, why would you think that way? Mm-hmm. And some of the problem is kids don't think logically. And so we're trying to hit them with logic, and that's not, it's logical, but it doesn't appeal to them. And so it's trying to get on their emotional level. It may be, well, you shouldn't feel that way because I know this, because I know this, because I know this, but you're thinking this way. That's just wrong. That's not true. Well, it is true if that kid is feeling that. Remember, people will post something. Well, I'm feeling bad today. It's rotten. Oh, no, you're a wonderful person. And they're just sitting there lying to them like crazy, throughout the whole thing. And I'm going, what they ought to be saying is, man, I'm sorry that you feel that way. And just let it be. Because the tendency for us to always answer something logically is sometimes that has more to do with us, because I get value out of that if I can explain things. If I can fix things, I get value. If I can influence somebody, that brings value. If I can talk long enough and get them to embrace what I'm saying, then that brings value to me. And so basically it's saying, I'm being selfish here. And so it's saying, I'm going to communicate the way you want to communicate. And it's on an emotional level. And it may be saying, well, I hear what you're saying, and I get it, and I can see why you're upset and why you're bothered and why you feel that way, but I don't understand how you got there. Can you help me with that? And I would rather go that way than to explain it away. And you and I have this tendency to explain everything away and give a reason for things. It's almost letting, why don't you tell me? And then you go, what? What are you saying? It just seems weird for me. Well, why? Well, if it's supposed to be logical, I don't think that fits that way. And I don't see it that way, but you may see it that way. And if it has to do with personal stuff, I tell kids all the time, how I wish you could see yourself like I see you. I wish you could see yourself as God sees you, or as other people see you. But I didn't know there was that conflict. So let's talk about that conflict. And it's not going to be solved in one meeting. It's going to be solved over coffee or ice cream or something. But it's not trying to, you have somebody asking you a question in Spanish and you're answering it in English. That's what it is. And it's saying, I'll learn Spanish and figure out how to speak to them that way. Does that help? Says the man with the rolled up pants. I don't see anybody else here doing that.
So I'm my own person.
You are, and I'm thankful for that.
All right, here, let's get to a real question here. Enough about my pants. What is an appropriate age to talk about sex with your children? I'm afraid to start too early, but also afraid to wait until it's too late, and then talk about that. And then also there's a question about modesty. So talk about modesty in an immodest world. So kind of talk about sexuality, kind of conversation, when, and then maybe
sex or sexuality?
Sex. Specifically, okay. This question is talk about sex with your children.
When? Man goes to his son and says, son, I need to talk to you about sex. And the son goes, sure, Dad, what do you need to know? I think our kids know a lot more than what we ever knew because they're watching those wonderful instructional videos on every porn site there is out there. They know what's going on and what happens. At the same time, I think they know the sexual part of it. But I don't think I've ever told anybody this, but I'm a long way from home. And I can just excuse it that I didn't say that. All those guys up there in Oregon were smoking pot. But my daughter, my future grandson-in-law plays baseball, and he'll probably go pro next year. And anyway, a year and a half ago, it was discovered he has testicular cancer, and which was kind of odd for a young man that's 19 years of age. And so they had to go and extract sperm so they can save it for a future date. And my granddaughter felt, well, I'm going to have to harvest all my eggs.
That's how this works.
Well, why? Well, they'll put them together. Hon, somebody should have talked to you about sex a long time ago. That's the stupidest thing. No, you don't have to do anything. You just sit still. But they had to have those conversations, but they're really two idiots talking about it. And I'm going, man, what happened to that sex ed class where the coach gets up front and draws a diagram? This is a penis, and I'm going, like a guy's going, I never knew that, This is a vagina. And draws this thing, and you're sitting there looking at it going, it looks like the horns of a cow. I mean, or you're just going, what? Did y'all have those talks growing up? And you look at it, you go, what in the world are they talking about? And then the concept, telling guys about a girl's period, they're going, what? I mean, those things are more kind of scientific stuff, or stuff that you deal with in biology or physiology, and they're going to get there. They'll learn that stuff. I think it's about, where you talk to them is about a sexual relationship with somebody, because now it's so permissive and it's kind of understood. 42% of, this was a study that was put out by the CDC and the Center for Disease Control. They ask kids all these questions, and 150,000 kids, and they come up with all this. It's every year. It's on the CDC website, and you can go and look at it. But this was like 8 years ago that they said that 42%, what they found at the end of it, 42% of girls, 46% of guys from the ages of 15 and 17 within the last 6 months have engaged in oral sex. Now think about that for a minute. That means that all your daughters over here have engaged in oral sex. Isn't that something? And you kind of go, is that true? Well, that doesn't have to do with talking about sex. That has to do with the sexual relationship and the impact that is happening, I think, because of porn. Porn, when I looked at porn, we were on a hunting trip, and you always pray that somebody's got a bunch of magazines underneath a bed somewhere, the uncle that has them, and you go and you look. I remember the first time that we went on a hunting trip, and my son had a blanket over his head and this flashlight, and he's sitting there going through these magazines like he had struck gold, and so I go in and I just, and I knew what he was doing, and I grabbed the blanket and I pulled it back. I laughed so hard. It was just hilarious that he gets caught. Well, that's what I learned. Now they watch videos. And the videos is always oral sex first and foreplay, and the girl does this. Like every girl, they just can't wait to do it and to suck on something. That they're just like, they portray it that these girls are just dreaming about that at night. I can't wait to do that. So this guy gets the idea that that's what it is. And then you got these little girls, 13 or 14, that are growing up and blossoming out. The girls that live with us, they're 13, 14, 15 years old. There were no 13, 14, 15-year-olds that looked like that when I was in 7th, 8th grade. Well, there was one girl named Edna Smiley, but she had flunked 4 or 5 times. And but it never was. And so all these girls, and they're desperate for a relationship, and you got guys that believe that this is what they want to do because this is what they're looking at. And so these girls are desperate enough, they would send nude pictures of themselves. Just watch the Heartlight Stories thing. And you got girls that are 11 years old sending nude pictures, and you're going, you gotta be kidding me. But they're desperate enough. That's the discussion that needs to happen. It's these guys are influenced this way, and they think this way. Girls, you gotta stay away from this. This is what's going to be demanded. No wonder girls are going, I'd rather have a relationship with a girl. I would. I mean, you begin to understand that this is what's going on. And a girl wants a warm relationship. It's not, here, I'm going to stick this here and stick this here. And they're going, I don't want that. I want the warm relationship. So the girls I know that are in same-sex relationships, something's happened along the way that's kind of pushed them that way. And I go, it's helped walking them. Those are the kind of sex talks that need to happen. When you talk about lesbians or trans, you got plenty of opportunity just to ask a million questions. What do you think about it? What's it mean to be transsexual? What does it mean to be bisexual? What does it be pansexual? Well, I mean, the idea that sex is, pansexual, they just love having sex with everybody or anybody, regardless of, and I go, well, anybody could do that. Anybody can. You can pleasure yourself with a garden hose, with a vacuum cleaner. Doesn't mean that now you're going to spend. That's where the sex talk needs to happen. And it needs to be blunt. It needs to be out there and just, this is it. Say what needs to be said and do it in a funny way. Come up with something. I will never write a book about it. It just wouldn't. I'd be booted off radio. God. I'd never speak in another church. We had this girl that came to us, and she says, this is a long answer to a short question. I walked into the room when I greeted him, and she had a haircut that was a little bit different and dressed like a guy. And she goes, I said, well, Sarah, how are you? And she goes, well, my name's Sarah, but I'd rather be called Bob. Okay, Bob, I'm okay to call you that. And she goes, I think it'd be better if I lived in a guy's house than a girl's house. And I said, well, the interesting thing is we don't divide them up that way. We divide them up by penises and vaginas. And so whatever you got, that's where you're going to go. And there's a seriousness, because what I'm saying is that's our stance. Whatever you're born with, that is what God created you as. And so that's what we determine. It's not by all these choices that you get to make. And so it positions ourselves. And so that was really the beginning of a sex talk with somebody. Most of our kids are so confused about all that, they have no idea what's going on. So this transgender thing, if you understand all of it, I don't, all the titles and stuff, then that would be a place to go. Or you're answering questions about the they, them, pronouns and all that other stuff, which is just a scream to me. It's just a scream. But it's faddish and it'll pass because it's stupid. And don't they think so? Or them think so? I can go off on that. I can do it. Oh. But we'd be laughing so hard. We wouldn't accomplish anything. That food would come right back up. The Bohemian or Mediterranean salad or whatever it is. So.
All right, we'll take this last question.
Well, I don't think it's good enough to be the last question.
Well, maybe.
Okay, so because of the transgender stuff, and it's everywhere, so our big debate right now is theater in high school. So what do we do? Like if our daughter wants to be a light, but if she's around all the darkness, like what does that look like? Do we because there's another place she can take theater where she's around a lot of light. Because earlier you were like, bring the friends in to feed them, and not just food, but nurture them, right? these kids that are screaming for help.
Yeah. What time are we starting the next section? No one is supposed to start like a, yeah. You know, I think that's one of the tough ones right now. It's a tough one to answer. Because that girl, Bob, we didn't take her. Just because of the influence that she would have on other kids. And so I think that's where you have to be discerning. If your child can be involved with somebody and not be moved by it, then that's okay. And your kids, I mean, I didn't know anybody that was gay when I was in high school. I mean, one guy, I mean, he was kind of light in the shorts, but really had no idea that he was or not. And now I think there's every...
He thought you were gonna say he rolled his pants.
No. See, now I got a follower. No. No, but I think I think it's I've got to ask the question, if my child can hang around them and I know it's going to be okay and we're having discussions, then that's okay. I've got to make sure they're not being influenced by that. And so it's different for a 12, 13-year-old that sometimes they feel like they see that they're given permission. I'd be a lot more protective of a 12, 13-year-old than I would a 17 or 18-year-old. Because the 17, 18-year-old, next year, they get to go do whatever they want. And they're going to be around everything. The discussion I'm having with my granddaughter who's playing volleyball in college is, you realize who you're going to be surrounded by. No. Okay, let's talk about that. I've been in collegiate athletics. This is what you're going to find. You're going to have people approaching you because you're this tiny little thing that is cute and all this other stuff. You just have to be aware of that. And so, can she handle it? Right now she couldn't, and she's 17. She's going to have to get ready for that time. So that's where those discussions will come into play. Jan doesn't have those discussions because she would quote a scripture that's not what it is. It's not the integration of Scripture. It's the practicalness of how we flesh that out in our beliefs and values, and that takes some work. Hey, this way, and it's usually a long discussion. It's not going to be one of these short discussions that we're going to have it and it's going to be over with. The homosexual thing has been around a long time. I was in Pompeii, Italy, and we went to, anybody been to Pompeii? 15 acres of Mount Vesuvius blew up, covered up this village back in 500 BC with ash, and it preserved everything and all the pictures and frescoes on the wall and everything else. And we went into this one building, and it was evidently the house of ill repute or something. There were pictures of every kind of sex act you can think of all over the walls. I'm sitting there taking pictures of all of it just to kind of remind me of what's in that thing. And Jan's goes, you look weird taking pictures of those things. I go, I know, but what this proves is this homosexual thing's been around for a long time, and we're not going to solve it. That's where I've come. So we're not going to solve it. It's always going to be there. It's like trying to solve all these other things. I go, there's a scripture that talks about don't spend time in quarrels that produce nothing. And so I go, this isn't my fight. And there's just some things I don't fight. But I will fight for the influence on a child. And so I know that I protect them earlier on and then release them here as they get a little bit older. But I want to make sure I'm having discussions along the way. And that's going to be one of those 6-7 year discussions. We're not going to solve it all at once. If you feel like your child's going to be influenced one way by being around other kids like that at an early age, then I would go, absolutely. I would protect them from it. I've got another granddaughter. She can be around anybody there is, and she's not going to be influenced one way or the other because she's pretty solid in what she believes and what she feels and how she fleshes that out.
How old is she?
Who?
The younger one.
The younger one's 17, the older one's 22.
But at 13, and if she's around people that could influence her for 3 to 4 hours a day,
I think that's a lot of influence. Now, don't go home and say, hey, that guy with the mustache said to kick you out of theater, and we're moving to Texas, and, I mean, I don't think it's that, but I think it's just going, I think that's where parents have got to play a part and say, we're protective of things. I think that's the debate that's happening right now. What ought to be allowed in schools and not. I go to California, the land of fruits and nuts, my lands. What they're allowing there, I'm going, what are you, an idiot? That's child abuse. And and so you just go, wait a minute, you can't, I mean, that's what we hear about you guys. And no wonder you're smoking pot all the time. I would be if I was out here. No, I'm joking. But I mean, I think it's a debate that you've got to include your kids in, make sure you're having discussions about. I mean, the marijuana thing, you have to. It's changing. It's going to be, it's going to be even different in the years to come, even more so. Laws are going to continue to change to use money that comes out of that world into the world. I mean, the federal law is you can't. State law says you can. So no money can go into a federal bank. That'll change. It'll eventually change. And I go, and that's the key. Things are changing, and I just want to be on the forefront of that to make sure I'm understanding what's changing so I can speak truth into it. Then the challenge is, how do I apply what I know and believe into that? And that takes work. It takes a challenge to move from, just information to wisdom. And that's where you guys get to spend some time. Especially you.
Absolutely. Okay, let's talk about this for a minute here. My teen has become very introverted. It's hard to get the conversation going. Advice on how to ask questions to spark deeper conversation. So and I want to tie it together with demotivated kids.
Yeah.
So struggling with school, permit tests, looking for a job. So you kind of have introverted, like how do you engage that? And then what about demotivated kids? They're like, I don't want to do anything. I don't want to get a job. I don't get my permit, whatever. I might be 18, and it looks like the kid's coming up on 18 soon, and just is kind of demotivated. So,
Yeah.
Introverted, demotivated.
Yeah, quit providing everything for them. Scripture. There's a scripture that says, discipline your son while there's yet hope and don't participate in his death. And there is something about saying, I've got to push my child to do something. Your child's doing what they're doing because they can do it. And until you make it where they can't do it, they're going to continue to go on that path. And you'll end up with a 25-year-old clown on a couch playing video games, and you're going to be wondering, what are we supposed to do now? Well, you can start it now by saying, I'm going to require that. I'm not paying for these things. And I bet you that 17-year-old that's turning 18, you're paying for stuff. And I would say until you could pay for some things, I'm not paying for it anymore. Does that sound mean? It's easy to say. It's hard to do. And but at some point, it's saying, I'm not going to do it because I want you to do those things. Now, they may not be motivated because they're not prepared for the world that they're going to be living in, and they're scared to death, or they're overly anxious. And anxiousness has to do with things that can't be seen. Depression has to do with things that can be seen. Depressed is, I'm fat, I'm no good, I'm not doing well in grades, nobody likes me. Those are depressive things. I'll never be able to complete that test. I don't think I can make it. That's anxiety, the inability to function. And so it may be anxious. That's where you may need help of a doc. That it really is. That's how the culture is affecting our kids. And if it's creating that, it may be that's where you get some medication to help. I used to be an anti-medication guy. I'm not anymore, because I see it helps kids get to a better point. If you've got a child that's depressed and really depressed, can't get out of bed, can't do anything, you can feed them all the green leaves you want to get them to a point where they're coming out of their depression. It's going to take you 9 months to get there. Or you can put them on meds and start seeing the effect within a couple of weeks. Now, you do it under the care of a doctor, of course. But I go, I wouldn't want a child to be like that, because I know the other side of it is that coping skills or coping mechanisms are now approved and okay. Your kids can answer the question that I never had to ask as a kid: how would you commit suicide? If you were going to commit suicide, how would you do it? I bet you your kids can answer that question because they've thought about it. Because they hear of everybody, Pam Spade. Was it Pam Spade? Is that her name? Kate Spade. Robin Williams. God, there's just so many of them that they hear of. The influencer that people in their 20s have been watching, 20s and 30s have been watching, that takes his life, and they begin to feel like that's okay. Just, it's crazy. So that's why I wouldn't allow a child to remain in that state of depression.
What about for like introverted kiddos? Like just kids that struggle communicating. Like, is there any tips, tricks to help a kid that maybe just is?
Yeah, I think it's loving on them. We had a young lady that was with us that just always talked like this. I don't know. And we would say, okay, you don't get to do things until you do know. Okay, I'm going to ask you 3 questions a week, and we need to discuss those questions. And at first it was just 1-word answers. Then it was 2-word answers. And then the safer she felt, she was looking for a way to release those things and to be able to talk about stuff. It's the atmosphere. If you're always correcting a child all the time, they're going to become introverted. When my wife interrupts me, I just stop talking. There's nothing that shuts me down quicker than somebody interrupting me. I just go, okay, well, evidently what you have to say is more important than what you asked me, so you can just sit and talk to yourself if you want. I've always been like that. Imagine every man in this room is exactly the same way. That once the interruption starts, and so that's where you have to say, am I a part of that, where a child doesn't say anything? Now, there's a Tough Guys and Drama Queens book in the back, and in the back of it, there's 100 questions that I wrote, just kind of conversation starters with kids. Because what I'm doing is trying to start a conversation so I can go deeper and deeper and deeper. And I know that I'll eventually get there. But I'm always asking questions like, if you could pick one profession to be, what would it be? What's the one thing you would never see yourself being? What do you like the most about church? What do you hate the most about church? What do you love the most about school? What's the one thing that bothers you? You just ask questions that hopefully you get in the pattern of doing that and you get to a better spot so that you can carry on things and they feel safe in having those conversations with you.